Hello everybody, it's Ordinal, and today we're doing a new Minecraft mod spotlight for 1.14.4. So today we're going to be looking at Zeroneye's Powah mod. So let's get out of my little campsite here and let's go over to the area where I've got all the items. So Powah is a mod focused on energy generation and storage. So it adds a variety of items with multiple different tiers for each, and so let's go through them. So the first item that we'll go through that's added is called the energy cell. So basically you have a basic energy cell, a hardened energy cell, a blazing energy cell, a niotic energy cell, and then also a spirited energy cell. This is the same for the others. So you also have a fernator and a magmatic generator. They're the same tiers for each. Each in their own respective right, both store and or output more energy. So in terms of the energy cells, they can store more energy, and then with each connected block face can output different amounts of energy. So the higher you go, the higher the input output, as well as the energy storage. And then with the furnators, basically your furnator is your average furnace generator, so you can stick coal inside any of these furnaces and it'll start storing to the buffer. If you have a connected, say, item from, say, silent mechanisms, it'll charge that first, or say if you had an energy cell, it'll charge that first and then internal buffer will be filled. Coal basically fuels that, so any kind of solid fuel source, whether it be wood, coal, charcoal, they go in here and you get your basic energy. So as I said, you can input the coal for each one, and you can also see how much it's generating per tick. So this one generates 220, that one generates 90, this one generates 500, this one generates 2400, that one generates 10,000. So each tier is definitely worth the upgrade, so furnace generators. Next up we have the magmatic generator. So basically you use a lava bucket, so it's liquid fuels, and you can right click with the lava bucket and it stores it in an internal buffer. You can also try to use pipes from other mods that you utilize or that have fluid pipes and pipe into this. And then basically each tier generates a similar amount to the furnace generator, just that instead of using coal and solid fuels, it uses lava. I believe there will eventually be support for other modded fuel items, possibly the thermal expansion ones when they come out, but for now, just lava. So next up we have solar panels. So these are your renewable energy sources for the mod, and basically they each generate different ones. So you have basic, hardened, blazing, niotic, and then spirited. So each one generates different amount. These ones are nowhere near as much as your magmatic and fuel generators, but they generate, so the basic one generates 10 forge energy, then 40 energy for the hardened, blazing generates 140, niotic generates 450, and then spirited generates 1200. Now the good thing about these is that multiple can be placed around each other, and obviously you can then connect them up with energy cables. Speaking of energy cables, we actually have multiple energy cables. So we once again have the basic tiers of each. So we have the basic, the hardened, the blazing, the niotic, and the spirited. And they can all be utilized to transfer the energy between these devices, so say an energy cell or other items. Here I've got a, creative energy cell, which I shall be utilizing to, send power to these dimensional and player transmitters. So talking about the player transmitters, we have two options available. So your basic tier of player transmitter is obviously just the standard one, and then you also have a dimensional player transmitter. These transmitters allow you to transfer energy anywhere in the world to the player's inventory, so items that utilize power, whether they be in your armor, your curios, or even just in your bog standard inventory or offhand, they will charge them up via whatever power they are connected to or their internal buffer. But basically, to utilize these, you have to make binding cards, and then these are normally blank, but when right-clicked will bind to your player, and then basically if you were to say put them in the player transmitter, it'll then start transmitting to you. I'm going to put one in each. For the dimensional player transmitter, it can transfer up to 2 players at once, so you can put 2 different people's ones in there, so that's definitely very handy. So if you're on a server, that could be good. Just to show you an example of how it works, I'm going to put these items that require energy in my inventory. I'm also going to put the jetpack inside my armor slot. I'm going to stick these down here. As you can see, the wireless crafting grid from refined storage add-ons has fully charged itself already. The mining gadget is definitely charging from Dial 20's mining gadgets. And then, as you can see in the left-hand side of the screen, my jetpack is slowly charging up. Or if we look here, we can see that it's slowly being charged. Next up, we have the energy dischargers. So basically, we just charged up tools before, but basically, we're now going to decharge them. So basically, what you do is you stick in items that have got an energy value attached to them, and then this energy discharger can discharge the energy out of them and then store them to an internal buffer. If then connected via cables to an energy cell, will then store that power in an energy cell. So that's very useful if, say, you have excess power in an item that you wish to, say, upgrade or change out, then you can utilize that power without wasting it. Now, so I've shown you all the basic items that the mod adds, so what I'll do now is I'll go through the recipes, because there's a whole load of recipes, as you can see. So yeah, let's go through some of the things that we've got. So, to make the blank cards used for your binding cards, you need dielectric rods. Those are pretty simple in the fact that it's just, 2 dielectric rods next to each other side by side, and then you get a blank card. There's also a dielectric casing for a lot of the machines. This is done by 4 iron ingots, 2 dielectric rods, and then also 2 dielectric horizontal rods. Next up, we also have a wrench. So this is used for rotating machines, power cells, and whatnot. That is basically made via using dielectric paste, so 3 of that diagonally, and then 2 iron ingots either side. To make that dielectric paste, you utilize 3 coal on top of 2 clay, as well as a lava bucket, and that'll get you some dielectric paste. And then to make the dielectric rods that we needed earlier, you use 6 dielectric paste and then 3 iron bars, and that'll get you some dielectric rods. To get the horizontal dielectric rods, you just place the dielectric rod in the crafting bench, and then you'll get some horizontal ones. Very easy. Moving on from that, to make the binding card, you utilize the blank card that we made before up there, and you utilize 2 redstone dust as well as a rotten flesh to get your binding card. Another recipe is the aerial pearl, so these are used for the player transmitters. Basically, you utilize 4 dielectric paste, 4 iron bars, and an ender pearl. Also, to get the photoelectric panes for the solar panels, we use 4 dielectric paste as well as a glass pane and 4 lapis lazuli. And to get basic capacitors for a lot of the machines as well as the energy cells, we utilize dielectric paste, 4 iron ingots, and a block of redstone. So we also have a variety of further energy capacitors, but to make each tier, it's a very similar recipe, just that for the blazing one, for example, you use 4 dielectric paste, 4 blaze rods, and then the previous tier's capacitor, so you just utilize whatever's beforehand. So you have a blazing, niotic, spirited, and then your basic, as well as your hardened. So each one just utilizes the tier beforehand. So it's pretty easy, pretty simple. Once again, if you struggle with some of these recipes, having a mod like just enough items is very helpful, so you can find the recipes very easily. Basically, moving on, to get a large basic capacitor, you put 2 basic capacitors side by side in the crafting bench, and you shall get yourself a basic capacitor large. To get tiny basic capacitors, you just place 1 basic capacitor in and you'll get multiple tiny ones. And then for the player transmitters that we talked about earlier, you need to utilize an aerial pearl as well as a dielectric casing, 2 basic capacitor large, and then a dielectric rod. And then basically to get a dimensional player transmitter, you use 2 Eyes of Ender, a player transmitter, and 2 blazing capacitors. Moving on, we have the recipes for the energy cells, so these will start to seem pretty repetitive. So basically you utilize, for the first basic tier, you utilize 4 iron, 4 basic capacitors, a dielectric casing, and that'll get you your basic energy cell. And then to make the further incrementations of different tiers, you utilize the previous tier's energy cells, and then you also use, say for the hardened one, 4 gold, and then the dielectric casing in the center, and that'll get you your hardened energy cell. Then moving on to the blazing one, the only things that you change out are the top and bottom energy cells for the matching tiers capacitors. So for blazing energy cell, you utilize blazing capacitors, and then you use blaze rods, and then the hardened energy cells on the left and right. This is the same for the Niotic one, so you use 4 diamonds, you use the previous tier's blazing cells, and then you also use Niotic capacitors. Obviously, your dielectric casing stays in the center for each of these recipes. And then for your final one, which is the Spirited, you utilize the Spirited capacitors, the previous tier's Niotic energy cells, and then 4 emeralds as well as the dielectric casing, and that'll get you your Spirited energy cell. Moving on, we have the recipes for the Fernators, so it's very similar to the previous one. Basically, you'll start to see a little bit of a repetition. This one's a bit easier to follow. So for your basic tier, you utilize 3 iron on top, 2 basic capacitors either side, and then a dielectric casing in the center, 2 iron either side of a furnace at the bottom, and then you get a Fernator. And then next up we have the hardened one, which is 3 gold at the top, 2 basic capacitor large, and then a dielectric casing in the center. We then have 2 gold either side of the previous tier basic Fernator, and then you get your hardened. This is the same for the blazing, just that instead you use blazing capacitors as well as blaze rods, and then obviously the previous hardened tier. This follows on with the Niotic tier, which is instead of blaze rods or gold is diamond, as well as the Niotic capacitors and the previous blazing tier. Then moving on to the final Spirited, it is the 3 emeralds, the 2 Spirited capacitors, as well as the previous Niotic tier. Next up, we have the magmatic generators. So basically, it's very simple. You can utilize iron at the top, 2 basic capacitors, a dielectric casing, 2 iron ingots in between a bucket. So very easy to get your basic one. Next up, you basically do the same thing for your magmatic generator, just that instead of iron, it is gold, and instead of basic capacitors, it is basic capacitors large. Then also the previous basic magmatic generator instead of the bucket. This then follows on with the blazing tier, which instead utilizes blaze rods, the blazing capacitors, and the previous tier's hardened. Then this follows on with a Niotic, so instead of blaze rods you use diamonds, as well as the Niotic capacitors, as well as the previous tier's blazing generator. And then finally, the Spirited one is just utilizing emeralds, Spirited capacitors, and then a Niotic generator. And that'll get you all your tiers for the magmatic, the Fernators, as well as the energy cells and your misc items. Next up, we have the solar panels. So these ones are a bit different. So we need to utilize photoelectric panes, which I showed you how to make earlier. Then you also use basic capacitors in between with a dielectric casing, and then 3 iron on the bottom, and that'll get you your basic solar panel. This then is a very similar recipe for the rest of the solar panels. So you use the previous tier's solar panels, which is the basic ones, 2 large capacitors, a dielectric casing, 3 gold. Same with the blazing ones, just then the capacitors have been changed out to blazing capacitors, and the bottom row has been changed to blaze rods. This is the same for the niotic, which is then instead utilizing blazing solar panels on top, and then diamonds at the bottom, and niotic capacitors either side of the dielectric casing. And then for the spirited solar panel, you utilize the 3 niotic solar panels, as well as your spirited capacitors, and then 3 emeralds at the bottom. And that's your solar panels all done. For your energy cables, it is relatively simple. You utilize the dielectric horizontal rods, which I showed you how to make earlier, as well as the 2 basic tiny capacitors, and then a basic capacitor in the center. That'll get you your basic energy cable. Then to move on to the next tiers above, you utilize the same dielectric rods in every single recipe, the previous tier's energy cables either side, and then a next up tier of the capacitor. So this one is the basic capacitor large for the hardened ones. For blazing, you utilize the same dielectric rods, and you use the hardened energy cable as well as a blazing capacitor. For the niotic energy cable, you utilize the blazing energy cables either side, as well as the niotic capacitor in the middle. And then for the final spirited tier, you utilize the niotic energy cables, as well as the spirited capacitor in the center. And last but not least is the energy discharger. So basically, to make that, you just need the dielectric paste either side, 6 of them, and then 2 large basic capacitors, as well as 1 dielectric casing, and that will get you your energy discharger. Now, to make the player transmitter that we made earlier, we needed to utilize the player aerial pearl, which is basically just a aerial pearl. So if we grab one of these out of this chest, and then you can either utilize a zombie or a husk mob. But for this purpose, I'll just utilize a zombie, and then you basically right-click that aerial pearl on a zombie or husk, and you'll be given a player aerial pearl. And then that can be used for your final player transmitter. Right, thank you all for watching. That was the Powah mod. It's a very useful mod for your energy needs. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a comment and like down below. And yeah, I shall see you in the next video. Right, take care and goodbye.